Hello, I'm Joseph Anderson, student at Canterbury Christ Church University, and I'm fascinated by the brain. Welcome to my presentation on applying neuroscience. Today we will discuss what it is, why it is important, and some real-life applications. I will begin with the historical developments and recent advancements in the field, followed by the basics, the central nervous system, brain regions and their functions, neurons, and chemical activity. Second, I will highlight some prevalent neuroimaging technologies and brain stimulation techniques which have been developed to diagnose and treat various neurological and psychiatric conditions. Next, we will explore the role of the neurotransmitter dopamine in motivation, pleasure, and decision making, but more specifically, how research can be applied to diagnose and treat addiction, ADHD, and schizophrenia. Finally, I will discuss various job roles and career paths, what they involve, qualification requirements, or recommended experience to enter work in neuroscience. But what is neuroscience? Neuroscience is the interdisciplinary study of fundamental processes within the central nervous system and brain, which are responsible for all conscious experience, from perception of sights, sounds, and smells to feelings of love, anger, and awe. From digestion, breathing, and heart rate, to memory, decision making, and problem solving, the brain generates and regulates every living moment. Fundamentally, neuroscience is concerned with how the chemical and biological reactions within this special organic matter result in mental activity. Collaborative efforts with developmental, cognitive, behavioral, and clinical psychology combine psychological theories with a mechanistic explanation of cognition, behavior, and well-being. Even computer science utilizes neuroimaging to better understand the correlates between natural and artificial intelligence and to pioneer new brain-computer interface technologies. But that's ahead in the future. Let's start at the beginning. The genesis of neuroscience is arguably ancient Egyptian mummifications, where they believed that the heart was the seat of intelligence. However, Greek philosopher Hippocrates reframed the brain at the center of experience. Luigi Galvani discovered bioelectricity, demonstrating that nerves operate via electrical signals, which laid the groundwork for understanding neural activity. Pierre Florenz conducted experiments on lesions in animals that provided clear evidence that the mind was located in the brain. Removing parts of the brain caused behavioral changes which confirmed the hypothesis about the function of the brain. Paul Broca further localized mental functions to brain regions of speech. He studied patients with speech impairments and discovered that those with similar speech deficits had damage in the same region of the brain, now known as Broca's area. Camillo Golgi developed a staining technique that makes it possible to see individual neurons under a microscope. This was a groundbreaking discovery as it revealed the cellular structure of the brain for the first time. Building on Golgi's work, Santiago Ramon Cajal proposed the neuron doctrine, which states that the neuron is the basic structural and functional unit of the nervous system. Eric Kandel elucidated the synaptic plasticity theory, showing that learning and memory are the result of changes in synaptic connections between neurons. His work on sea slugs revealed that the strength of synaptic connections could change, providing a cellular basis for mental activity. The late 20th century marked the advent of neuroimaging technologies such as the CT and MRI scan. These tools allowed for detailed, non-invasive visualization of the structure and function of living brains. The 21st century has been characterized by large-scale brain mapping projects such as the Human Connectome Project and the Brain Initiative, which aim to create comprehensive maps of neural connections. In recent years, neuroscience has continued to evolve rapidly. Brain-computer interfaces have developed to assist individuals with disabilities, improving their ability to communicate and interact with the environment. Advancements in MRI and PET imaging have provided new possibilities for research and diagnostics. And psychedelic treatment for mental health disorders are emerging as a promising new therapeutic approach, with substances like psilocybin and MDMA being investigated for potential benefits in PTSD, depression, and anxiety. The central nervous system refers to the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is a connection between the brain and body, which sends sensory information up to the brain and motor commands down to the body. It does this via the peripheral nervous system, which is the network of nerves that connect the central nervous system to limbs and other organs. The brain is divided into three main parts: the stem, the cerebellum, and the cerebrum. The brainstem connects the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. It controls automatic functions necessary for life, such as heartbeat, breathing, blood pressure, and sleep cycles. The cerebellum plays a major role in motor control, coordination, precision, and accurate timing. It's also involved in attention and language processing. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, responsible for high-level function such as perception, learning, memory, emotion, and more. It is divided into two hemispheres, each controlling the opposite side of the body. Each hemisphere contains 4 lobes. The frontal lobe is the largest lobe, important for cognitive functions and control of voluntary movement. The prefrontal cortex is located at the front of the frontal lobe, behind the forehead, and is responsible for planning, decision-making, and moderating behavior. The parietal lobe processes sensory information from the environment and relating to touch, taste, and spatial positioning. The temporal lobe is involved in processing auditory information and encoding to memory. Finally, the occipital lobe is responsible mainly for vision. Some other important regions include the amygdala, which is responsible for emotion, regulated by the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus is critical for the formation and retrieval of memories. The thalamus relays motor and sensory signals to the cerebral cortex, the outer layer of the cerebrum. And the hypothalamus regulates physiological functions such as hunger, thirst, temperature, and sleep-wake cycles. On a cellular level, the brain is constructed of approximately 86 billion neurons and trillions of synapses. Neurons are a specialized cell designed to transmit information to other nerve cells, muscles, or glands. Within a neuron, dendrites receive signals from other neurons through synapses, which are spaces in between neurons which they use to communicate, which axons use to transmit signals at the end of the terminal. A different type of cell, called glial cells, are often called support cells, which provide physical and nutritional support for neurons, which modulate neurotransmission. That's it for the basics of neuroanatomy. Now let's talk about neuroimaging techniques used to study the brain. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, is a non-invasive neuroimaging technique that measures changes in blood oxygenation. When the region becomes more active, blood flow increases to meet the metabolic demand. fMRI detects these changes and generates high-resolution images, known as functional maps. Electroencephalography records the synchronized electrical potentials generated by large groups of neurons by placing electrodes on the scalp. EEG is known for its high temporal resolution, capturing the rapid changes in brain activity with millisecond precision. EEG is used to analyze brain rhythms such as alpha, beta, and gamma waves, which are associated with different brain states and cognitive functions. EEG plays a vital role in diagnosing and monitoring epileptic seizures and sleep disorders. Positron emission tomography, PET, involves injecting a radioactive tracer into the bloodstream, which emits positrons. These positrons collide with electrons in the body, producing gamma rays. Detectors surrounding the individual measure these gamma rays, enabling the reconstruction of a 3D image that reflects regional cerebral blood flow, glucose metabolism, and neurotransmitter receptor density. PET scans are used to investigate conditions such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, epilepsy, and addiction. Although there are other neuroimaging methods, let's quickly mention 2 therapeutic brain stimulation techniques. Transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS, is a non-invasive brain stimulation technique that delivers weak electrical currents over the scalp. These electrical currents modulate the excitability of underlying brain regions by polarizing the neurons, making them either more or less likely to fire. TDCS has gained significant attention in clinical interventions. It is explored for cognitive enhancement purposes, such as improving memory, attention, and learning. It has also been used to investigate therapeutic conditions such as depression, pain, stroke rehabilitation, and schizophrenia. It is considered safe and well tolerated with few reported side effects. Another non-invasive brain stimulation technique, called transcranial magnetic stimulation, uses magnetic fields to induce electrical currents in underlying brain tissue of targeted regions. It involves placing a coil over the scalp, which generates a rapidly changing magnetic field. This can either disrupt or enhance brain activity, depending on the parameters. It allows researchers to temporarily modulate specific areas and observing the resulting behavior or cognitive changes. TMS has also been used for the study of various neurological and psychiatric disorders, such as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and chronic pain. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers which travel across neuronal synapses to bind to receptors on the receiving end, known as postsynaptic neurons. They will either excite or inhibit the cells, making them more or less likely to fire. There are many different types of transmitters, each with different functions, but here are some of the most common ones. Dopamine is known as one of the feel-good transmitters, although it is more important than simply pleasure. It is the chemical responsible for motivation and drive. Whenever you want to complete your workload, travel abroad, or get out of bed, dopamine is to thank. Experiments on rodents have showed that dopamine-deprived rats will not even bother to get up to eat or drink without this precious molecule. It is linked with conditions such as addiction, ADHD, and schizophrenia, which we will discuss on the next slide. Adrenaline, known as norepinephrine when in the brain, is involved in stress responses such as fight or flight. It increases heart rate, triggers a release of glucose metabolism from energy stores, and increases blood flow to skeletal muscles. Serotonin is associated with mood regulation, sleep, appetite, and digestion. In fact, 90% of the serotonin in the body is found in the gut, so it's heavily related with food. Low levels of serotonin have been linked with depression and resulted in the controversial development of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which is a medication used to treat depression, although they have not been mechanistically understood. GABA is the primary inhibitory transmitter, which produces a calming effect, reducing feelings of anxiety and fear. And glutamate is the most common neurotransmitter in the brain. It's involved in cognitive functions such as learning and memory, as it's an excitatory neurotransmitter, making neurons more likely to fire. Dysregulation of dopamine systems are implicated in various conditions such as addiction, depression, ADHD, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, and many others. Research on dopamine can help in understanding and diagnosing these conditions, in addition to developing effective treatments. Dopamine is often referred to as the feel-good neurotransmitter due to its association with reward and motivation, and it is therefore heavily involved in addiction. Addictive substances or behaviors cause a surge of dopamine, leading to a strong feeling of pleasure. This reinforces the desire to repeat their behavior, and over time, exposure to these dopamine surges will diminish the brain's reward system, leading to the development of a dependency or addiction. This is why addictive substances and behaviors can become compulsive and difficult to resist, even in spite of negative consequences. A meta-analysis by Wu and colleagues 2012 found that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is linked to lower levels of dopamine. Medication used to treat ADHD, such as Ritalin and Adderall, work by increasing the levels of dopamine in the brain. These drugs block the reuptake of dopamine, making more of it available to transmit messages throughout the brain. which can help reduce symptoms such as inattention and hyperactivity. A systematic review by Luvsanyam and colleagues 2022 found that dopamine-increasing medications, such as those prescribed for ADHD, actually exacerbate symptoms of schizophrenia, whereas antipsychotic medications work by blocking dopamine receptors and reducing activity. Although dopamine and other neurotransmitters are involved in various neurological and psychiatric conditions, they are complex and multifaceted issues which are also heavily impacted by other factors, such as developmental and environmental. The mechanisms behind both these conditions and drugs are not fully understood yet, but nonetheless, associations between dopamine and these conditions provide opportunity for early diagnosis and more effective treatments. In psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia and ADHD, the direct measurement of dopamine levels is challenging. However, researchers are using PET and methods called single photon emission computed tomography, or SPECT, which can measure the uptake and release of dopamine in the brain. Understanding the relationship between dopamine and the specific condition that the patient may have enable the prescription of drugs which can increase or decrease neurotransmitter activity. In addition, certain types of cognitive behavioral therapy are based on the understanding that rewarding behaviors lead to a release of dopamine and thus can be used to motivate behavior change. There are numerous applications to neuroscience to well-being, whether it be psychological conditions or everyday lifestyle behaviors to boost health and cognitive performance, such as sleep, sunlight exposure, cold exposure, and many others. However, due to time restrictions, we will now explore some job roles and career paths in neuroscience. Research roles contribute to existing knowledge by conducting studies, applying theories to real-life applications, and exploring new methods through experiments or clinical trials. Studies may impact medical treatment, educational strategies, and lifestyle behaviors that can improve well-being. Educators include teachers, science writers, and public policy advocates. They share current theories and research with the public, improving learning, productivity, and well-being. Educators teach in various settings, from schools or universities to prisons and care environments, and can use platforms such as television interviews, podcasts, or by publishing articles or books. They often integrate with research roles, but can often be distinct. Healthcare professionals encompass clinical psychologists, occupational therapy, and medical roles such as neurosurgery. They utilize neuroimaging techniques to understand abnormalities in brain structure or function in order to provide effective treatments. The qualification requirements will vary depending on the job role and the entry level. Lecturer positions at universities generally require a PhD or equivalent in neuropsychology or related field, such as neuroscience, biology, clinical psychology. Prerequisite of the PhD would be a master's degree at distinction or merit level and a bachelor's with previous teaching or research experience. Entry-level positions in clinical and therapeutic settings, such as rehabilitation centers and psychiatric facilities, often require a master's or bachelor's degree. Health psychology, neuroscience, occupational therapy, and related fields will all be appropriate, but specialized areas such as clinical neuroscience will require a doctoral degree. Medical professionals such as psychiatrists, consultants, and surgeons require extensive education and training. After a master's in a related field, medical doctorate, MD graduation, and 7-year residency placement is required. It is an extremely intensive field, and subspecialty fellowships may be required for further specialization. All relevant courses will offer a British Psychological Society accreditation or equivalent, enabling professional practice under well-defined rules and regulations. To conclude, we've covered what neuroscience is, the historical and recent developments, neuroimaging methods such as fMRI and EEG, and applications for addiction, ADHD, and schizophrenia. We also covered some different job roles and what they might include. Thank you for watching, and here are the references that have been included.